Alright, so um, this post is more, it's not really much of a post, obviously. Um, it's, it's more obviously, it's like a conglomeration in my mind of what, well, at least since I've written it and having thought about it the last few days before making this video, um, the whole connection between 17 and money, I guess you could say, or not even just money, but abundance or life, like force, because that's really what the dollar symbol is about, is the serpent on the cross, or um, the serpent and the cross are of like the elements and the movement. Um, 16 obviously is like this number of geomancy and voodoo and uh, the elemental construction basically of 4 times 4, and then 16 times 16 is 256. And I mentioned how the, or Tau Hey Hey 256 is not only the ritual, which the whole ritual of the circle and the cycle of the tarot, and uh, really the whole Book of the Dead ritual, and the awakening, and the whole cycle of basically Ra and Set, and the Golden Dawn, and the reawakening or resurrection. Uh, all that stuff is pretty much what 666 is symbolic of. But obviously, like I in the last post went over some of the more negative connotations that obviously we relate to money, and have been for ever since 666 was referenced in the Bible, being the 666 talents of gold given to Solomon, which I'll get more into as we analyze this further. But then also the whole 666 mark of the beast, market or monetary system. Market being, of course, the Hebrew rendering with a tau 666, and then monetary in English gematria being 666 as well. And 666 also being both the solar and Saturnian symbolism, and that the alchemical union, which is really the whole solar and Saturnian, is the lead and gold, uh, as anyone who would know anything about alchemy would know. And so uh, that's really what black magic, the whole alchemy, going back to Chem and ancient Egypt and all that, and well, even Saudi Arabia, or not Saudi Arabia, but the Middle East. That's where like the Picatrix and um, Liber Salomonis and whatnot come from. And anyway, the whole the money system, and just money in general, and they call it like this: the love of money is the root of all evil, and because it's like this external chart. It's basically I don't know. 666 is obviously a number of like the soul, and it's the solar center, the magnetic energy center, and so that's what I've analyzed in these like later blogs dealing with like the mechanization of man, and how all this stuff basically is. If you look at the Gnostic traditions, or Gnostic, ideologies, this is sort of like what they were warning against, and it's all like precisely spot on as far as the whole source code and the coding of it. But even Revelation 13:17, it says, that no man might buy or sell save that he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And it's just again, people don't fully know, like they don't realize how deep this sort of code goes. In this post, there's really I mean, obviously, there's a lot of other stuff already been said about it. I would advise everyone to go read, like, The Secret Symbolism of the Dollar Bill, or whatever it's called, by David Oveson, and obviously Tracy Twyman. She wrote about it and consistently, like, mentions it in a few of her books. And the whole symbolism, I think, like, I don't know, it's not just exclusively tied in with 17. As I, like, was thinking about how I made this post about this subject, see, I even referenced, I don't even realize, because I didn't really consciously think about the number of the posts when I was writing them. It's only now, looking back, I'm seeing some connections. And, like, so really the dollar sign, some people have associated it with the number 18 because it's more closely, like, symbolically connected. And 18 is like chi or chai in Hebrew, which is life. And it's also just, I'll get into that in the next post because it all ties in. Like, each number kind of it is a string. Like, I mean, obviously the number spectrum implies, obviously, that, like, each number it's relative, but yet they self-imply each other, especially with the what's called reciprocity. When you reverse the numbers, they actually they do have a relation with one another, and some people have shown that in just various diagrams. But then when you look at the gematria, there's also relations. And so, yeah, like, I've been accused of being schizophrenic and just crazy, and I mean, I guess that's to be expected, but a lot of people, like, that's why I can feel compelled to talk about this stuff, because they're just very frightened or something. Like, but then again, it's like they want to see the bad things regarding, like, 666 and the Kabbalah. They want it to be negative, and yet then they tell me I'm negative. It's like, I don't know. It's just, I think it's kind of, it's ironic, but I've always just went about this trying to, like, learn and wanting to know. I could care less about the infighting and this sort of, like, anti-Semitic stuff, like that. It does seem like the Jews, the Jewish culture and whatnot, has certain relations to money, but from what I'm learning about, like, with the Kabbalah and the numerology of it all, that's not necessarily, I don't see that as, I mean, I don't really think that it's as bad as people say, in that, like, I don't think, because they want you to think and be like, not they as the Jews, but, like, certain factions, because everything's so split up into factions, they don't want anyone to just, like, see things and unite things and, integrate things, because it's a threat to their establishment, basically, kind of like churches. And even, I mean, in a way, yeah, like, in a way, the Jewish people, like, for whatever reason, when you talk about gematria, they like to think that it's only theirs, and, it wouldn't be applicable to English because, that's like a Gentile, like, it's, I don't know, there's just a resistance, not just, it's in any person or group or culture, because they feel threatened, I think, by another whatever thing, that's why, like, with voodoo and stuff, there's this big thing when you look into it, like, they claim, like, you can't know anything about voodoo unless you're initiated by the actual voodoo priestess or voodoo mambo or Huangin or whatever. And I just don't think that that's necessarily true, because if you study it and you study the various traditions and, like Tibetan Buddhism or Lamaism and stuff, like, and you see the levels, and, like, even with Kabbalah, the levels of the worlds, or the levels of manifestation, the magnitudes of, and especially of energies and basically of cause and effect itself. Like, that's the thing about voodoo, is it's actually a very down-to-earth, mechanistic thing, like magical system, that's what makes it so effective, is the fact that it's very much based on, again, the elements and the spaces in between things as well. It kind of incorporates that whole idea of the geometry and the alien or non-Euclidean geometry and the vectors and the interstices, and getting, like, that's really what the whole Tibetan Buddhism thing, and why I link these things together, is that when you look at the numerology of all these things, it helps to get beyond that sort of superficial exterior way of looking at things, and you can kind of, that's how you end up seeing the holographic nature of the mind itself. Like, it's like, because it's hard for the mind to see the mind, because it's like a mirror. It's very mirror-like, or mercurial, and it's like the eye being able to see itself without a mirror itself. So it's obviously impossible, and that's just a metaphor. And anyway, like, so yeah, I just knew that this whole blog post, it's like just a springboard for these ideas and these relationships. And 17, obviously, again, is the 17th kala, which is, it's kind of not there. It implies the combination of all the kalas, and the kalas being, again, 16. And to me, another thing I was thinking about is how in the Ayurvedic system, they say there's like 107 main marmas of the body. And again, 107 is ulam, consciousness, and thought itself, and XYZ, and it's the egg. So it's basically the auric egg. And also 7, and then 100 Kaf, as 10 times 10 is like the illusion of Maya, or just Malkuth itself, and then 7 being, again, like the archonic, the main kalas of the colors, really, in the Ruach. And so 107 is the Aku, the magical sort of force. And yeah, 107, basically, it's related to 17, obviously, with the egg, and the egg being the void, but also the sort of where that 17th kala comes into play with time and space, and the colors and manifestation. I know that's all very abstract and weird, and probably doesn't make any sense to anybody who hasn't read about these ideas of the kalas and the how they relate to time, and how 17, it's the path of the sword, and it's also Kaf itself, like the 17th Hebrew letter, or the 17th English letter. And I believe it, yeah. And Kenneth Grant links it basically with the whole idea of the sword, basically with the lightning bolt, and the dorje or vajra, and the lightning bolt, of course, goes with Aleph and 111, and the swastika. And the swastika is obviously the most basic point. Like, if you make a swastika in points, it's 17 points. And the swastika is 666, and which is a solar number. Again, it's all about that sort of the X and the O, or the cross. Ox basically is Aleph. And I've went over all this. I'm going to go over it in my blog, like, as I read these posts. But the mark of the beast, basically, as the circle with the cross, or the swastika, basically solidified, is 666, because the swastika is 666. That's that whole Saturnian nature again, which the negative aspect of the swastika is still most people can't get over that and see it for the true meaning of what it means. And what was I going to say about that? But yeah, the lightning bolt basically is symbolic of the bolt itself is 111. That's Aleph, and that's the white light, the first raying into manifestation from Kether, and obviously the first letter having that first Kabbalah of 9 chambers number, and none of the other letters have that. It just it's like the first, one of the first signs along the path for the Fool. And even Aleph, all the variations of that, as even Pal would be like pal. Well, he's always got his pal, the dog, following him or guiding him. Really, it's also, that whole star is, that whole card is related to the Orion constellation and Sirius, the dog, and again, the star card. Zodi is also related to 17 in a lot of ways, with the whole shift in the tarot, with Aleph as a 0. And so that's this whole thing. Like Aleph, that's what I was going to pull up. First, I'll go over 17 real quick. Crowley mentions how it's IAO, O with the Vav, like Liber O is Liber 6. And 6 is obviously Tifereth and the hexagram and so many things, obviously. Like it's the Vav, and that's where obviously it's the funnel, which the whole funnel effect is talked about in Dark Doorway of the Beast. And the funnel effect has everything to do with the microcosm and the macrocosm and the lensing into manifestation, which obviously IAO is part of that whole formula. And Tawa is the Hopi creator deity. That's the thing, that the voodoo, the Tibetan and like Buddhist traditions and stuff, they also connect with the Native American traditions. Like if you look at a lot of their beliefs, I'm part, like my grandma has some Sioux Lakota Indian in her, so I've got like a small percentage of that. But the Sioux means it relates to the snake, and their whole symbol is all the medicine wheel, which is like the mark of the beast also. But the elements and the movement and the cycle, again, it's the whole ritual, the 256. And the 17th Kala, again, is related to Ayu, because it's the root of Ayurveda. That's how it connects with the 17 or the 107 marmas in the body. It's the life flow, basically, and like the Vata is the wind or air. And then, but Way, like 71 is the number of Lamb, and Kenneth Grant he mentions how Lamb and 17 are related. He doesn't mention that Way is 17 though. And it took me a while, but Lamb is obviously 71 plus Way makes it 88, and then the 88, Lamb the Way is 107. And he gets really close to mentioning that because he talks about how Lamb or 107 is like the number of Lamb with the egg. But he never actually mentions Lamb the Way as 107. And it took me until like 2013 when I'm writing the work of the egg that I realized that. And that's why, a lot of this stuff, like, it takes some effort and time and putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And people want to scoff at that and say that, like, again, like, oh, there's no point, or you're just doing this, or you're just that, or whatever. And that's why, but you have to just keep going and go on, and who gives a shit? It's like, none of that really matters. This stuff has its own value to it. And see, like the Buddha, the root of Budhi or Buddha is bud, which means to awake, and it's like, to bud. And that's funny because THC is also 17. It makes me think of, obviously BUD would be would be 12, but Bud, again, this 12 hours and the cycles, and it has the same root as more familiar masculine form of Buddha and Bodhi. Yeah. And then Ifa, so 16 is related obviously to the oracles of Ifa and the Ifa divination system, but Ifa itself is 17, and that just, there's a lot of connections in that, and I'd have to say just read the Voodoo Gnostic workbook and Hecate's Fountain, and you'll see how basically these different systems, particularly again the Lama system and the Voodoo system, connect in this way of a practical external and internal method, or like way. It's pretty much, that's what the whole middle way is about. And the middle pillar and the lightning bolt, which again, the lightning bolt has its converse, consort to the snake, the serpent, which implies that sort of more structured or strict geometrical kind of idea. And then the serpent is more like, it's like the left and right sides of the brain, or the anima and animus. And my friend, someone was talking about the whole number, the fact that numbers, basically, if you look at the calculator itself, 741 or 147 is it's lines, it's the path of the sword, so to speak, or the pillar of severity, you could say. Whereas 369 or 963 is the opposite of that. They're all rounded pretty much. Three's got the point, but 369 has its own properties. I'll discuss as we go on. But then 258 is obviously the middle, and it's got a little bit of both. Like 8, it's got the lines and the rounded parts, especially in 5. But 8 being, they're both rounded, but the whole idea of 8, like the 8 directions, is also very structured, but it's kind of implies the middle pillar, or the combination of that in its penultimate sense, really. I don't know, I've just been pondering on that, because the calculator obviously is the Saturn square of Saturn, and again, it's like the numbers 1 through 10. It's really 1 through 4, because if you add that up, it's 10, and that whole unfoldment process is symbolic of like the elements, and the numbers having this sort of elemental quality to them. And that's technically what Crowley says Malkuth is, and Koth and all that, like all these numbers combining to create manifestation bit by bit, or Shakti by Shakti. And 17, when you spell out 17, it's where is it? It's 195. See, 17. Samek, Hey, Vav, Hey, Nun, Teth, Hey, Hey, Nun. And again, the 17 connects with the Fool, with the whole swastika and the whirling motion, the cycle, and the whole the rays of manifestation. And the Fool, obviously, as Frater Achad, his last name, Charles Stansfeld Jones, is 195. The whole connection between money and 17, payment and pay with cash. Like, I've looked into this whole digital currency and digital money thing too, and it does connect with 666. This whole knowledge of 666 is like unfolding more than ever now, and it has everything to do, obviously, with the Eon of Horus and the Eon of Maat. Maat being, Kenneth Grant says Maat is one of the roots of the word math, or mathematics, because she's the measurer and the weigher. And whether or not that's accurate, I don't know, but at least the idea is pretty, it's cognate. And it's just funny also, like, I'm talking about all this stuff, and the word for Freemason, like someone who reveals Freemason or Freemasonic secrets, is a Cowan. And I mean, these aren't really Freemasonic secrets because, first of all, I wouldn't. They're not even really secret or secrets because I found them on my own. And again, I think that people need to know this stuff. First of all, they'll remain secret by their very nature, like Kenneth Grant's books. If like the fact that people won't even be able to grasp it if they're not either ready, if it's not relevant to them, or unfortunately, that's the problem with like Crowley's work and stuff, is it's completely perverted by the very people who claim he is, whether, he, like, again, I don't know. There's no evidence that he was as bad as, like, the YouTube videos like him to be made out to be. But, and I don't really even, I don't know, like, all of his other work speaks for itself in its own way, and it needs to be understood in that, like, in its own sense. And so all that is kind of like a distraction. And distraction, again, is 666. And I'm not saying that, like, oh, believe it, or this is the way it is. It's just something I have found that seems to help make sense of the bigger picture. And more so than just these single fragments of the thread, alone would. There's a lot of connections here, like biology, and again, all this computational biology is one and the same with gematria itself. Like, at least I've gone to that extent of using gematria as a form of, like, computational biology, neurology, theology, and there's a lot of connections. Like, the bones is 206, and there's apparently 206 bones in the human body, the adult human. And so there's a lot of numerological coincidences or coincidences. These words, for whatever reason, like, trigger people, like synchronicity and coincidence. That's all. I mean, I don't know. Again, a lot of things, it's all about perspective and attitude and motivation and motive, intention, or whatever. But I know this is a lot to take in. It's probably too much. And with the number things, like, there's such a dynamic thing. It's a form of code work, basically, or light work. What was I going to say? Yeah, I wanted to mention Tracy Twyman's book, Baphomet, and the Temple Mystery Unveiled or Unsolved or whatever. And because it's interesting. She doesn't actually mention Kenneth Grant at all, which is okay, but I think she mentions him in something about the Merovingian mythos, but maybe not. Maybe that was someone else. But either way, it's odd to me how Kenneth Grant gives so much insight and access to all this knowledge, yet he's shunned, kind of like Crowley. Crowley is the same. Crowley gives insight and so much good guidance, and it's like manuals and all this stuff, but yet that's the thing. Anyone who knows what they're talking about or has something good to provide are usually attacked 10 times, like tenfold. And so it's understandable, like, in a way, again, like, that's what Crowley used as a sort of a blind or a veil, or to keep some people away from these deeper things. Because not like it's up to him to determine whether they are worthy or not, but it really is up to them to determine whether they are if they have the mind and the wherewithal to slow down and see something and read something and understand it. But that's not to say there's not other sources and other people, and like Gurdjieff, he kind of provided a sort of route to a certain like method. He provided a method of introspection, and then also being able to apply it. And uh, again, there's various like Gnostic teachers and teachings, and various. I mean, I'm interested in all that stuff. Like I was studying the Heaven's Gate cult, and even the Heaven's Gate cult is 222, and there's a very culty quality to 222. Cult itself is 444 with a tau, and church is 222 with Gimmels. So cult and church 666. Everyone knows that whole that analogy that really the only difference between a cult and a church or religion is the number of followers. And pretty much like with the right justification and with the right mental manipulation, people can be made to do almost anything, like suicide or like war, whatever, and with enthusiasm, with the right mind control. And so, I mean, Heaven's Gate and all these other cults, who knows if they're experiments, one of many, or, you know, many of many, or if they are genuine just croppings of people being demented. And I'm aware, like Kenneth Grant calls pretty much the whole Typhonian tradition, one of the things he calls it is the cult of Lamb, or at least his take on how Lamb fits in and extends out of Crowley's work, basically. And the cult of Lamb, like the term cult has a negative quality or negative connotations to it because of all the cults. But really it's the root of culture and cultivate and occult, obviously, but obviously people who don't even have the most not like very much knowledge about the occult associate the term cult and occult for that reason. I mean, it's just the terminology, but technically, like it's a cult. Like look up the definition of cult, and it's basically a religion regarded as unorthodox or spurious, obviously, a great devotion to a person, idea, object, movement, or work. So like the cult of Lamb is just devotion to, or maybe not even devotion, but work with or work on, because it says or work, a film or book. It's like a fetish. The term fetish has like the sexual connotation, but really it goes back with the voodoo and idols and objects, like sacred objects, and veneration. So basically what I'm saying is I realize the whole cult of Lamb is a sort of like UFO cult, but they're not, it's not like it's about any, at least from what I gather and am interested in, it's not a negative, like, oh, this is bad or anything. Like, I look at it from what can I gain from this? What useful kalas or qualities or ojas or energies can be absorbed from this knowledge? And that's what the whole Arachnean gnosis of Michael Bertot talks about, like, or at least what Kenneth Grant mentions in Outside the Circles of Time, like the venoms, the absorption of the venoms. And again, like with the computational biology thing, with all the animals and animal totems, when you look up some of that stuff and then you look up the scientific names and you look up just certain obvious things and legends, and we all know that the serpent is symbolic, again, of like knowledge and particularly like life and health. That's what the Asclepius and the Caduceus are all about. And they've found stuff like regarding serpents and venom and how it can be useful in various treatments. And basically what I was thinking about, and Kenneth Grant hints at it directly because he even mentions how Lamb in its full value with mem final as 631, Lamed Aleph mem final, is equivalent with the Greek Thanatos, which is death, the god of death, or just death. Thanatology, the study of death. And well, that implies the two main things basically of human, like, what is the main goals of human evolution. It's, or maybe not, I mean, the two main things that, like, humans are looking for or striving toward are what? It's meeting aliens, which, or finding confirmation of alien life. And Lamb is, again, Grant says, like, Lamb is one of the first human alien contacts recorded and established, uh, especially with all this sort of like Kabbalistic verification, kind of, with, that's what Iwas and Crowley's whole prime postulate of religion and the Book of the Law are and represent, is sort of like a proof to the world of something that could not have been just made up. And there's books now, and there's people trying to claim that that Library L was a complete fabrication, and that, like, therefore none of it's worth shit. Well, that's the thing, is, like, if you read book 4 and the sort of exegesis of the whole, like, him coming to obtain the Book of the Law, and then his subsequent revelations, and along with Frater Achad and the whole key, and then just read Kenneth Grant's books. Like, there's too much, and Crowley was just one of many vessels for something much bigger that has obviously pretty much saturated and altered the planet completely. And in the Ninth Arch, he says that that's basically what's happening, is, like, in a way, AI is a sort of alien invasion, in the sense it's a qliphothic externalization of the simulacra, or it's like they want everything recalculated, recalibrated, and restored, really, but so that it can be controlled in an external sense. And, like, it's basically that is what the path of the magician in its negative or inverted sense is. If you read The Night Side of Eden, it's the Black Brothers trying to basically reach the secrets of God and the universe, or go the back way, around the back way, so to speak, together, which with CERN and all that stuff is kind of what that's about. And that's the thing. You don't, like, that's what knock and it shall be, knock and it shall open, ask and you shall receive is all about. Oops. Because again, like, it's the 666 thing. It does have an oracular quality. It's not just 666, but the Kabbalah of 9 chambers. The Oracle is 333. If you learn this sort of system and you get it basically, like, ingrained, so that it becomes natural and you can read the codes, you will have this sort of oracular vision. I know this sounds crazy and out there, but all I'm saying is, if you study, not just study, but if you practice and you decode all the, like, your vocabulary, and you put it in a database and you have it and you go over it, and I know that's asking a lot, and I don't expect many people to do it, but it's up to you if you would want to. Like, there's other ways. That's the thing. My friend, I know someone who doesn't do any gematria, really. She knows about it and is interested in it, somewhat, but it's not as deep into it as me. And so, but yet she has her own sort of natural, intuitive gematria sort of database in her own mind. Like, and I'll ask her, like, what do you think about this number? And then I'll go look in my database and see how much it corresponds. And it does. It shows me how much the mind, especially the subconscious mind, is very calculator-like and very simple and very bit by bit. And yeah, so basically, if you do this, if you practice it, it ends up becoming a second nature. and you'll have what you could call receptions, or like, insights come up from, basically, I wouldn't say from aliens or from you're channeling it. It's really, I think, just your subconscious mind and the way things associate and resonate. They call it sympathy or sympathetic magic, is how, like, with the way in which the planets and the days and the hours ultimately influence things. In a sense, it's just like a color or a shade or a time or an essence, a kala. And when you become a cognizant, you can kind of help, like, those things kind of help. And that's why we, I don't know, it just explains a lot. And so those sort of things need to be taken into account, at least insofar as, like, I don't necessarily say, like, oh, you need to be constantly aware of all these things. It's just being briefly aware, like, what is it? Being familiar with these ideas helps to, again, get the bigger picture. So what was I saying? Lamb being the whole alien, Lamb and Thanatos being connected. It's alien life, and what is the other thing humans want to obtain or attain, which is transcendence of death. They want immortality, and that's been the case forever. Like with the whole Amrita and elixir of life, like the alchemists, Crowley himself, they wanted immortality. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best goal, at least in the external sense, because it will cause in its wake, like, untold horrors. And all for what? For the clinging to the ego. And I was discussing this with another friend, because I was really, for some reason, I was just intrigued by the whole Heaven's Gate thing. And I was listening to their last words, and just had different thoughts on it. Like, I do feel they were manipulated. They claim they're not, but I feel like they were, because the fact that they all said they weren't. And but in a way, I was just thinking of also they did seem very happy about it. Like, holy shit, like that it shows the power of brainwashing, first of all, but at the same time, it also shows, I couldn't help but thinking of this sort of connection to Buddhism, and obviously, like, the self-immolation comes to mind, but also the Tibetan Buddhist, the Book of the Dead and all that, like the conscious dying. If you read the Evans Wentz introduction and like commentary and stuff on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, he has this whole thing about death consciousness and consciously dying, Samkranti. And obviously there's that somewhat thelemic, but also there's a book, forgot what it's called, it's in my closet, but it's by this Sikh guy, and it's about dying, consciously dying, or dying daily. That's kind of also a thelemic concept. And every moment is the last moment, and everything is like, we are dying every second, ourselves, but in a way, that's when you realize we are etched into existence by our very existence. That is the whole path that is the magician. You are the magician by the fact of your existence. And so the whole death Thanatos thing is like the shadow, and it has everything to do, obviously, with the tree of death. And so Lamb as this sort of alien, and Thanatos, it's all about this sort of what's beyond the human life wave. And Sits 31, Thanatos, or Lamb, what is Sits at 6 minus Sits 31? It's 35, and that's the number of the key, Kaf, Hey, Yod. And so it's the key of death, the key of life and death, the key of Lamb. 666, obviously, that's what that's all about, is this whole life force, the solar current, the fact that they say it's the sun or the soul is a gateway or portal for alien or external forces, outer forces. And clefothic forces, again, it sits at 6, and parasites, which implies the negative or the alien, the other, the xenos or foreign forces, which Set and Satan all represent. And Satan in the original Hebrew is 359, which implies, again, it's one less than the circle. So it implies like the black hole, or the opening of the circle, basically, or the abyss. And that's why it's the beast of the abyss. But it's also the fire snake with, Nun, which is the death current and the death card, but also the soul, the fish, and the waters. So it's like the fire snake, and so it's like the water and fire snake. And water and fire, again, make the alchemical connection of the dragon and creation. And fire and water also have the same value, and spirit of water, spirit of fire, it sits at 6. Sits at 6 is obviously more so linked to the spirit of fire, because it's Tifereth again, and 6 looks like a flame, and there's all the connections to sits at 6 and fire worship. If you read like the 2 Babylons and the sacred fire and all that, and it's got that phallic quality. But sits at 6 also has the quality relating to water, because water is obviously the fluid of life, and sits at 6 is all about life, like being chi, 6 plus 6 plus 6. And I'll talk about that in the next post, because Kenneth Grant links sits at 6 with Isis and 18 and the whole lost phallus and the restoration of the word of the Masons, basically. And that whole lost word and lost phallus is the soul. It's the hidden God, which is the hidden God. And all these ideas, you have to look at them you have to take them with a grain of salt. You have to realize they're all myths. They're all just legends, but they're all templates or maps for the initiatory process for the soul or the self to go through that circle of light and dark to, reach itself again. And that's why self is 101, which is Atman, Atman. And a self or anatma is 102. And Kenneth Grant talks about that too, and how that connects with the cult of Lam, the formula of Lamal, and basically with the whole 0 equals 2 or the universe A and B formulas. Again, that connects with this whole idea of the oracle or divination, you could call it, or scrying, because it's once you realize that it's all the yin and the yang and the light and the dark, it's all about seeing the light in the dark. And so like when you close your eyes, you probably like it's just all about awareness and again, intention. When you close your eyes and you see something, that is your connection to your subconscious mind. And if you do various either yoga processes or even just smoke 3 hits of DMT, which will just spontaneously give you insight into the Dharmakaya or the truth body, you'll just see beyond the external, you'll see into, again, that light. And it's almost like a spontaneous, what's in your mind and soul and intention will manifest. And technically that's what reality is anyway. It's just harder to see that, or that's what waking life is. And obviously the dream state is more so the mind reflecting itself, or it's just mind and will in a more sattvic or pure sense. And that's why, like, technically I would say not all dream states are more pure than the waking state. But and I've at least had some more like finer states of awareness than I can achieve while waking. Because when you're waking, you have all the conscious functions and distractions, and that's really what yoga is all about, is to revert the sense, and revert all sense is 666, showing again that whole inversion, or the axis, the solar axis of either external or internal direction or focus. And what was I saying? Basically, yeah, like you want to, the whole process of yoga is to get beyond those things, but really you have to unify them, and it's like the I've used this analogy before, but the drop merging with the ocean, it ends, you like with the illumination. It's not like all this once you're illuminated or reach samadhi, it's not like everything just dissipates and you're one with Kether, and therefore that's why they say you can't like reach Kether without dying or without being one and merging into, absorbing into everything. But really, that's the whole thing about samsara and nirvana, is true nirvana. You can't reach nirvana unless you are there to cognizate it and have that connection. And that's like the Chengzu or Chengzi analogy or parable of the butterfly and the monk. Is the monk thinking of the butterfly, or is the butterfly thinking of the monk? Or I don't know exactly how the parable goes, but that's a crude reduction. And obviously the butterfly is the psyche, the symbol of the psyche and the mind. And what else? It makes me think of the Rorschach and how you are. It makes me think also the path of what I was saying about the magician, the path of the magus or the magician, and how your existence or your being is it's samsara, it's illusion, but it's also, it's the manifestation or externalization of the truth body. There's three bodies or in the Buddhist tradition, and I think it's the Sambodha. No, that's the dream body. Hold on. Body of enjoyment. Yeah, it's the Trikaya. It's the three bodies. Dharmakaya, Sambodhakaya, and Nirmanakaya, the created body which manifests in space and time. Then the Sambodhakaya, the body of mutual enjoyment, bliss, or clear light manifestation, that's like the astral body. And then the Dharmakaya, or truth body, which embodies the very principle of enlightenment and knows no limits or boundaries. And that's like, if you watch the end of Liber Stelle Rube, or just that Tool video, I forget what, Lateralis, where the Kundalini enters the guy, like the man, and he ends up dissolving into the lines of light, and those light forces, that grid, the vector grid. Again, that's why this numerology or gematria has a consistency to it. It's like the thread of the spider, the spider web. Kenneth Grant links to manifestation because each interstice or each marma or cell contains like a portal to knowledge. It's like it contains knowledge, like the cell, the tunnels of Set, or the cells of Set, he calls them also. Set, the fire snake. So it's just like Tool kind of implies some of this stuff in their work, or at least because even Danny Carey on his website referenced or like tried showing Kenneth Grant's books, and he this drummer magazine, he talks about Hecate's fountain and drums, and there's a connection to that. Like Kenneth Grant talks about the Ashanti and Ashanti proverbs, and the Rattray guy who went and studied the Ashanti talks about their drum language and the beats and the beat sequence. Again, the beat sequence is 666. Interstices is 666. The interstices are the between spaces. Not only is language, that's where this whole that's where the Qlifoth really connects, like especially the world of the shells is 777, cymatics is 777. If you look at the whole Kabbalah of 9 chambers, you can see this cymatic or sound reverberation and vibration, and it's got a numerical beat sequence to it. And really, that's the thing, that it sounds like, oh, crazy metaphysical out there, but really gematria implies that all of this stuff is a very materialistic, bit by bit data type format, and everything will fit within, under the sun, so to speak, or within a numerical frame of reference. And again, that's also what the 17th Kala and what I was trying to imply in the interstices is about, is that, yeah, there is, though, these ojas or emanations or magical forces that are what you could call beyond the spectrum of the whole numeric, like they are within the numbers, but it's the fractions, it's really hard to explain, because it is the only vessel, the best vessel to think of that as is the zero, or the 0 point, and how the zero being naught is technically, it's like the sponge of it's a spongy thing about the fractals. And 555, if you look at 555, it's the word fractals, synchronicities, and it's also this thing. It connects with the whole this trance or vision of the sponge that Crowley had at Lake Pasquini or wherever it was, and how he saw like the stars of Nuit and Hadit in the space. Basically, he saw this connection between Nuit and Hadit as a very cosmic, spongy thing, which now science kind of implies itself if you look at their like renditions and the cosmic rays and whatnot. And I'll get into that again. Like I keep delving off into all these connections, like the dodecahedron of Frater Achad, and how they found that the background radiation is dodecahedral, and that connects with the tree of life and its fractal unfolding. But basically, what was I going to say? Anyway, yeah, I've trailed way off, but Lamb and Thanatos, I think that was one of the major points, even though it doesn't necessarily connect with money. The money thing, though, really, science, like humans, the problem with all of this is there's a hypocrisy and it's a blatant, like, I don't know, it's not for all this shit that you see going on. Like, they really don't want people to be thriving and healthy. Like, maybe, yeah, a select few, but, and that's unfortunate. There is a 8 billion people almost on Earth, and we can't have our cake and eat it too. And it's like we can't cure cancer while doing all the things that cause cancer without there being, some debt of some sort, or something's going to give way. Again, that's just a generalization, a metaphor, and I've already spent a lot of time talking about this. I don't want to get off into that, but basically I'm just thinking of money, this symbolism of the dollar sign, the numerological connections between it all. Money really is, again, the chi, the life force, and it's your connection to currency, that currency flow. Crowley says it's like you're linked to society itself, and really like it's your value itself. And again, sits at 6 is this whole monetary soul connection. It's the Saturnian. It is the Saturnian outer ring or rim, and the solar internal center, the magnetic energy center of the self. And again, like Liber O is all about, it's Liber 6, but it's O, and O, it's basically the astral body or the auric body, which manifests into the physical body. And so, I don't know, like, I was thinking even yesterday about how, like, well, what is it? What the whole thing about me even mentioning my name and my birthday and how those things were numerical, like, connections to this stuff that I'm talking about. And I don't necessarily think they're exactly connected, but like I said, they were the first things I kind of looked into. And like whenever I talk about this stuff, I've had people be like, "Oh, well, what does my name equal?" And that's your first, again, that's like your first connection to it. And that's how you want to see, are curious about that. And those were like the first cracks in the egg, so to speak, and the egg being this like the shell of Malkuth, that it's hard to see beyond, and it's, we like to say, oh, I only believe what I see, or I only believe it if I see it, and I've slowly, increasingly learned that the paradox of all these truths, again, like the circle and the initiation, and how once it comes full circle, it's hard to express the whole process or the whole equation without going back through it. And in a way, that's what I'm doing by rereading this blog. And it's yielding more insight and more data and formulas and whatnot. But I don't know. I'm just thinking of the magician. And again, that's what the magician being manifest. Like I was watching this other YouTube video of this stage magician or illusionist or whatever, mentalist guy. And he was like, oh, I want to find proof of magic in Tibet or wherever, or China. And he ends up like, he's asking all these people, and this guy's like, oh, you got to go to the mountains and find this magician or wizard or yogi or whatever, and who can levitate. And he goes, and the guy's like, I don't have any magical powers. I just meditate. And he's like, well, what have you learned from your meditation? He's like, well, it's just for me. Like, I can't really show you or explain it to you. And the guy is like upset kind of. And I don't know, it's Discovery Channel, so they probably faked it, but he ends up somewhat levitating. And the guy's like, oh, how'd you do that? And I don't know, like I've heard there's some myths and stuff of levitation, the Dardura Siddhi, which is like the frog power. And I don't know, that's beside the point, but the point I found, it's funny, is like the yogi seemed puzzled, like the guy seemed puzzled in a different way, but I was just like laughing. Like I can kind of see how it's just people want proof of magic, like some physical law breaking or nature defying, natural law defying feat of nature. And sometimes that happens. That's in certain ways. Like I've had weird shit happen. I've had balls of light come in my room. I've had power surges and like circuits break while doing things, like ritual things that otherwise would never happen. I've had crazy synchronicities, and now with the whole numerology thing, I see, yeah, it is a big web, so that's bound to happen, and it's bound to be numerically almost like precise. Obviously, there's a lot of static a lot of the time, so it's hard to see. But once you learn the Kabbalah and learn these things and the codes, and like I said, get it so it's a natural subconscious. It's not just a subconscious. So once it becomes a more conscious process, is what I'm saying, you will begin to see these sort of things, and it just becomes an everyday thing. But yeah, there will be greater, what I would say greater, well, these things are like lesser synchronicities. There will be like greater synchronicities that really tie into, like, especially with other people or other in time, like when you really see the time wave, or the how different things interact. And like we often look back and or realize, oh, this wouldn't have happened if this little thing didn't happen the way it did. And that's why we get this idea of fate and destiny, and that things are meant to be, because really, I mean, they are. And maybe there are other timelines or other dimensions. And the thing about that is, I mean, alterations and stuff like everything else would be. It's very complicated, but Kenneth Grant actually does talk about time, and if you think about it, time with a tau is 455, like he says, and then that's 100 less, 10 times 10, or Koph, the illusion of manifestation. So it's Koph and time is 555, which connects in a lot of ways. I'm just thinking, because if you really look at this whole time thing, it's the fourth dimension and the final hay, they all do seem cognate, and it's like we are slowly unfolding historically this process or function itself, and man, like Tetragrammaton again, is man, and it is God, and yet it's also Satan, which is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh reversed, which is like a dog, actually. Obviously, God reversed is dog. Beast and dog equal 77, and so does God in Hebrew, English. And then man, obviously Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh looks like Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh looks like a man, but then when you put it flat in reverse, it looks like a dog with like the head, the legs, and there's not really a tail, but it looks like a body kind of. At least when I was thinking about those relations, I was like, it's the beast, or the four-legged creature. And obviously, the evolution, which is also 6 is the evolution from beast to man to God. And so yeah, there's just all that is just on my mind regarding this, and how 666, it's got all these negative external things, but really it's very deeply associated with all these internal processes and internal realizations, and it's a code, basically. It's the source code. And like people who talk about this and try to reveal it to people so that they're not ignorant to it, because not to know is also 666, and that's why it veils everything you do not know, or the occult. What's occult? And again, the Saturn rings, the time. It takes time to grow and be able to see and learn and process and integrate things, and that's what you really have to be, patient with people about. Is we all have our different levels and times and growth cycles and periods. I believe, and another thing I found, the periodic inundation is 666, which that connects obviously, like Giza pyramids is 666, which I'll again get into later, because all this geometry, the pyramids, they are like a sort of book that house knowledge in their geometry. And so the fact that Giza pyramids is 666, again, they're a solar astrolabe. The 666 is all about the horse, or the solar cycle, the circle, the royal arch, and the periodic inundation. And obviously, the periodic inundation is both the Nile, which was right on the banks of the pyramid, or the pyramids, but it symbolizes, again, the cyclical time periods, especially associated with the sun and the moon, really, too. But also, obviously, the feminine periodic inundation. And also, what is the periodic inundation? It's like the flood, basically. Or so it's like cataclysm, the great cataclysm, the violent cataclysms, and the seismic activity and pole shift are all 666. And pole shift doesn't necessarily even... All these things, that's the thing about the gematria and these ideas, is they help you to see the multi-leveled nature of data itself. And so pole shift implies just a magnetic pole shift, not necessarily of the actual planet, but again of the 666 itself, of the self, the inner and outer directions is 666, and that connects with the whole cube and all that. So all this stuff, though, like it gets, you could almost say like redundant, like all these things equaling one number, and it's not just that one number, though. Again, because 666 is the Kabbalah of 9 chambers, and the whole Kabbalah, and the Kabbalah unveiled, spelt properly, even though there's the Mathers book, the Kabbalah Unveiled, but with a K. So just, it, again, shows the dynamic nature and the fact that you have to be aware and cognizant, and each one represents a process. And again, like, what's so bad about learning this and putting it out there so people can know and see and not be so negatively anchored against it? Because that's really what 666 in its negative sense represents. So the very people who claim to be, Christians are actually some of the biggest Satanists, and that's a sad state of affairs. And I'll be labeled, anti-Christian or whatever for talking about it and for saying that, when it's like the opposite, and that's this whole yin-yang, upside down, heaven upside down world we're in. 666, again, upside down, 999. And 999 is the true key, the true Trinity, as Kenneth Grant mentions in Outside the Circles of Time, because it represents the full chamber, and it's not only Therion, which Therion, or yeah, Therio, non-final, but it's also the wizard Mayan. The wizard Maya. And that's basically the fact that I've realized this stuff and realized that the eon of truth and justice is 999. It's basically the perfection or the perfect ion of this sort of information. And yeah, it can still be perfected. There's still a lot of work to do. I don't even consider this the best format or medium or way of putting it out there. And part of the reason I am is because who knows how much time either I have, we have, or how long, like, I don't know. The very fact that I get the feeling that this stuff has a resistance to it is the reason I'm putting it out there, and the reason I'm taking my time and energy, and even though I have second thoughts and feel like, what's the point, and it's like casting pearls before swine, and all this shit has gone through my mind. Like I said, I don't think I'm not the authority on the subject. I'm just, one step along a brick pathway along a pathway. So at least, I don't consider any of this to be a conclusion. I hope I just want other people to be motivated and have inspiration and feel that, they're the opposite. Whenever someone says, oh, there's no reason for that, or that's just, a dead end road or whatever, that's probably not the case. The more so that someone says that, the more so the opposite is probably true. And it goes for Crowley, Kenneth Grant, Jesus, the Bible even. I would say, hell, like the Bible, I was talking in the 16th, the last video about Christianity and how, like, it does have problems with it. But that's the problem with Christianity, is the outer representatives of Christianity are largely not the true representatives of true Christianity, in the sense of like what Jesus taught. And So that's the important, like, half of the Bible is a shit. Like, it's funny because there's 66 books of the Bible, and 66 is 1 through 11, so it's got that Clifothic number. It's also Gilgal, it's in Gilgal, GL, or Gimel Lamed. It would be 33 plus 33, and that's wheel. And the Bible wheel. There's that, website that talks about the gematria of the Bible, and now claims that it's like a hoax or something, which I think that the guy was either paid or from the start was another kind of like Bible code disinformation thing, damage control type thing. And again, like, it makes me think of this whole Jack Parsons Strange Angel TV show they have with like this extreme like sex cult thing, which, yeah, that stuff happens. Read about the Solar Temple or the Solar Lodge, and there's a lot of weird shit in all this stuff, but that's a side point, and again, a distraction, an externalization of just many, and it's like beside the point. And I think that's what it's like. It's funny how that show came up. I saw it come on right after I made the 9th post, I think it was, Phoenix Rising, talking about Jack Parsons, and I thought it was like just significant. And I'm like, God, what are they going to do now? They've got to basically make this all look like bullshit, which a lot of that stuff is. It's just like the OTO and these cults and stuff. They are one of the best routes for manipulation or getting people to do your will, or again, even to create a sort of diversion or distraction and make the actual work itself look bad. And that's, unfortunate, but sometimes those sort of things also attract attention also. And like, that's what Crowley also did. He tried to attract attention in some ways. And I, in a way, don't want that. Like, I would actually prefer to I'd rather everyone just, he's just another YouTuber, like, making, crazy videos that no one's going to watch, or very few people will. And I'd rather that be the case for myself than any sort of attention. I know that might not, who knows how this will be taken. People are very reactive to 666, to Crowley, to alien stuff, to mind control stuff, to this whole thing. It's just rife with bullshit and bullshit artists, and no one really wants to read, no one wants to learn anything, no one wants to do the processes and the work to change, to get over whatever habits or obstacles might be in the way, which we all have at any given point. I do. I've got problems with attention and keeping focus, and clearly, like, if you can tell, I'm like all over the fucking map. And my mind, because it's just, my mind is like a tree. It webs off, and that doesn't, I try to go back around. I try to, keep it all there, and then, go back around so that I'm constantly adding new insights. And because again, it's never a conclusion. Whenever I read like a Kenneth Grant book, especially, or any book, then I read another book, and then I go back and read that book. Usually it gives me more insight. So it's almost like a whole new book. And that's why I say Kenneth Grant, his books in particular, because there's 9 books, and each one is like adds another or multiple facets or layers to the existing. And so you kind of have to go back and forth, and it helps, like, you're just constantly getting newer and deeper insights. And for some people, that's too much to handle, because a lot of people want as little information as possible, or a summary, and okay, then again, a conclusion, and usually to write it all off, or to verify a preconceived notion, which that's a lot of what YouTube, all these, I use these examples because they're just prime examples, but like Crowley, in his demonization, it's like people want that. They would rather see him as this giant monster of all their, of this boogeyman, basically. And it's again, it's sad, it's funny, it's everything. It's funny, but it's sad because they're missing a lot, and it's not necessarily like, again, the knowledge. It's the wisdom and the exercise and the work that it takes. Because if I mean, that's the thing. Like, the true solution, I think, to any of like the problems with religion and with all these disagreements and stuff is the fact that people spend more time fighting than they do, researching or actually learning what they're talking about. And it's all to avoid that. And that's why Crowley's work it has its own relegation and value, and it has a special place for me, in my heart and mind. And that's why I've focused on it so much, and that's why I felt compelled to read the Libers. And I don't consider myself done. I mean, there's a lot I haven't read, and I want to make videos about some still, but it's all a process, and right now it's just not the best time. This is more easy to do right now, and I'd rather not just do nothing. Because I don't like any, like, I don't fear, but I hesitate to let any of this get stagnant and lost and forgotten. So that's why I keep databases, and I keep logs, and I keep emails and correspondences, and it is a fucking lot. It is a lot for one person to do, but it gives me, like, if I didn't, I don't know what else I would do. Like, I mean, I don't know. I just have a lot to say. It helps me to do this, though, so it's not just all bottled up, and it helps me to reach, higher and higher. The more I look back and I'm able to see, okay, I said this, and, like, I don't know. It's just a process. And trying to think back to what I was saying and probably trailed off of. I mean, this whole thing is very loosely tied to what this is implying, but not really. I mean, the symbolism of the dollar, it is the sigilized money is 333, I believe. The sigilized, and like money is obviously got all these symbols in it, and it has a lot of that's why it's got its value, really, is the symbolism and the weight behind it. And 333 is a very set. It's, again, like, if you look at the number 3 on the keyboard, it's the number grid, which is the Saturnian square, which is the whole calculator, and the Kabbalah of 9 chambers, like, all the letters based on their value, like 1, 10, and 100, 2, 20, and 200. That's the Eiq Becker, or AIQBKR. And basically 333 implies that it's like the grid in which sigils, and one form of sigil creation is like taking all the letters that repeat out of it, so you just have the most basic formula, and then you put it into a sort of like a sigil or a pattern. But another way is to just, it's like the geometric reduction, and Chagall, or sigil, Shin Gimel Lamed is 333. Graphical is 333. So it literally is the fact, again, how images or numbers can display or like come into manifestation as images, is this whole idea, especially with 333. But what else? That's where basically sigil, what I'm saying is sigil construction and 333, especially the seed, Shin, Hey, Deleth, the seed, and it's all about the subconscious, and 333 being the gatekeeper, or Karanzan, the gatekeeper of the abyss, or again, what's beyond the numbers, the Euclidean geometry or non-Euclidean geometry is implied. And so, again, I know I'm all over the map. I'm not the best at describing this. I just woke up and haven't even finished coffee. So I am all over. I'm just not in the right state of mind, but I know that's probably what some people want to hear. I know people think I'm fucking crazy with all this shit. But 333 is also, it's related to money in a lot of ways. Well, 333 is, I know, Jewish. 96. Jewish money. Yeah, it's Jewish money, magic. And the Jewish system and Kabbalah and stuff really does give a lot of insight into this whole money system, and money magic as a sort of practical, personal, again, with the 666 and the external and the charge and the direction in which the magnetic energy center is focused. If you can regain the lost phallus, or the lost word, so to speak, you can re-engineer basically this sort of stuff to be a more practical, personal tool, rather than it feed an external system or source or whatever. And so I know that's the thing. This whole subject is gonna, stir up something, but I don't really care, because that'll help the momentum of it all anyway. So I guess the best thing, that's why there hasn't been much reaction to this. Like, there's a few things, like people have mentioned it, and like I said, a Reddit post thinks that I'm schizophrenic because I even talk about this stuff, I guess, but none of it is really that. It's not like I've pulled, like, some of it that I've come up with, like the formulas and the codes and stuff, I've only came up with those based on logical deductions of, again, using the existing knowledge of, the Kabbalah and the processes, and applying it to modern knowledge and systems and words and whatnot and ideas. So if that's crazy, then I guess so be it, because it's only, everything I fucking see is, go subscribe to the news channels on YouTube and look at the daily feed, and tell me that is somehow a sane or an image of sanity, because I don't think so. And it's just funny. I'm told, I'm led to be to believe, basically, or think that, I don't know. It's just, again, it's upside down. The people in power, the people with money, tend to be. It's not like with money. It's just, the people with force or support, like the media and the. I don't know. It's just. I'm skeptical of all of that, and the fact, like, everything's fucking opposite. Like, people claim to be skeptical, but they're not, and it's ridiculously, like, it's absurd. It's like laughable. It's a circus, and that's, I guess, what the fool, being the clown or the jester, is all about. Really, the Hey Yoka is the Indian clown, and it's 111, which is Aleph, the fool. And I don't know. I'm just thinking. Yeah, that zero is the egg. again, the egg, the golden egg, or the coin, really. Uh, Manifestation. I just keep thinking of the magician or the magus card, and how what that really represents as, first of all, it's Beth, because Aleph is the fool, the magician is Beth, and the Beth is the house, and the house is obviously the shell, or your clefothic, your egg, it makes me think of, again, like Liber 6 or Liber O, because Tiferet 6 is the cube, and there's just all these connections that suggest themselves. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, I guess it is the method of my thinking being web-like and incorporating just various systems and traditions and knowledge is unorthodox probably to most people, especially, like, that's again the problem. Once you learn and read and go get certain knowledge and you see beyond the limitations of who you were or what you thought before, it can be increasingly isolating and alienating. And again, like, people will claim that you're this, that, or the other, when yet you're more organized, methodical, and clear thinking than they are, because, like, I've encountered this in my personal life, of people like to attack you and claim you're this, like family members, basically, like, even or friends, they'll get to know you and know things about you, then they'll use them against you as ways to manipulate you, and then claim that you're the bad guy, or you're the it's funny. That's another aspect to all of this, is the fact that having a sort of subconscious source code that we operate on, by unveiling or looking into it, you can kind of get a bird's eye view and see this sort of stuff. Like, you can have a sort of like a manual or a source code to understand how these things play out. And because, like, 666, I mean, I could go into all this stuff, but basically it's already written about in these blogs. So I know this video is already too long for most people, but again, that's its own lock and key. So so be it. And I'll talk more about all this stuff in the next post, because it's also doesn't have really much. It's really just pictures, so I'll be free to talk about whatever. And yeah, so I guess just have a good rest of your day. I got to get ready for work.